morning, my name is Hollywood Young.
I'm Ryan Croft.
I'm Katie Pratt.
My name is Donna Chacon, and today we will be addressing the lowering the voting age to 17 and how this impacts our question. To what extent would the requirement of a parental ID program and or lowering the voting age to 17 impact voter participation in national elections? Okay, so culture and society have a huge impact on who votes. History has held the responsibility of determining what we think of laws and amendments. For example, the 26th Amendment came into place because of the rise of youth activism in the 1960s, and especially to the Vietnam War. It was because of this that Americans of elder age in traditional settings started to think about people that were voting and thinking about 18-year-olds that were fighting in war on behalf of their country and just determining if they deserve the right to vote. As the ordeals placed by society have drifted, the argument has not. Also, there are undetermined factors that determine our differences as humans. So one of those factors is education. In this graph, we can see that people that received a postgraduate or a higher level of education turned out to be more present at voting elections, as seen here. In high school grad is red, less than high school is blue, and then the highest postgraduate is in purple, which shows that there's more people voting.
So economically, if you were to have suddenly allow 17-year-olds to vote, there would obviously be an influx in voters. And since this new influx, states have to increase economical expenses on polling booths and staff to be able to support these new voters. And by having more money go towards the voting, it would make polling places easier to access, the lines less long, which would encourage more people to vote, which would ultimately increase political participation. And then one issue would be if 17-year-olds would even be able to vote, since voting day is on Tuesday, which means that 17-year-old voters would struggle in polling booths, since obviously they would be at school and have after-school activities such as sports or clubs that could make it a struggle for them to get there. And even with people 18 or older, it's seen that what the second most reason why somebody without college experience didn't vote is because they were too busy or had a conflict on election day, or most of them had problems getting to the voting booth or just being able to register to vote. But a solution to this could be implementing voting registration at schools, and then leaving a time during the day that students would be allowed to vote, or even moving the voting day to Saturday, which would increase political participation not only in the younger demographic but overall.
I will talk about how if we allow 17-year-olds to vote now, it will increase the overall participation in elections in the future. Because if they're young and they get used to participating in elections now, it's most likely that they will most likely become more involved in politics and even hold important political roles in the future. I used evidence in the 26th Amendment, an article about the 26th Amendment that says democracy works best when all voters are informed and actively engaged, when the system for participation and representation is equally open to all. So if everyone is allowed to vote, especially 17-year-olds, it will most likely allow them to become more encouraged and feel that they are part and have an important role in today's political system.
Alright, and so I was political, and so basically what I was thinking about while writing and while finding all this information was that citizens in the age range of 17 to 25 are directly affected by changes made in the political climate. So the 26th Amendment brought change to that voting age, and we saw that 18-year-olds were now allowed to vote. This came around because the war at the time that was ongoing, and they said, okay, you're old enough to fight, you're old enough to vote. And so I thought of that quote still being relevant to today, because nowadays we see 17-year-olds and people that should not have to be out on the streets protesting, but they are. 17-year-olds nowadays are waging their own wars on climate change and gun reform, such things like that, that directly affect their future. And then I also looked at the First Amendment because in one of the readings by David Schultz, I believe his name was, he talked about how the First Amendment established a right to vote in state and local elections. So the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, freedom of speech and stuff like that. And so we see that as freedom of speech. Voting is your freedom of speech. You have the right to vote. And that's something that's always been said. And so nowadays I really feel like that's relevant to what's going on and how people should use that right and go out and they should be able to make their own decisions. And so by including 17-year-olds in that, because as previously stated, they are going out and they are making these protests and wanting huge changes in the world, they should also be included in voting. And so all of this information supports our main topic that the voting age should be lowered to 17. So overall, all of our lenses and everything that we spoke about today talked about how it would increase voter participation. By allowing 17-year-olds to vote, you're getting more people out into the world voting. You're getting more people conscientious about what's happening in politics and how that directly affects them. So people with similar and unsimilar backgrounds are given the opportunity to vote, and so we believe that 17-year-olds should be as well. Thank you.
Sarah, Katie. Line up based on Katie if you would. All right, so I got a question for each of you. I'm just going based on how the order your names were at the beginning of your presentation. So Nat, you're up first. In the future, hi, let me try that again. In the future, what change would you make to your group norms, and how would you expect that to improve your presentation?
In the future, I would most likely change maybe deadlines and maybe outside of school practicing, which I would think might help us do the presentation better.
Okay. All right, Katie, you're up next. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your understanding of the problem?
So I would say that Natalia's information and her research just kind of really spoke to me. It was kind of a collective thing though, but if I'm picking an individual, it was definitely Natalia, because futuristic, that has a lot to do with how politics are going to be in the future. And all the things that she was saying, I felt greatly affected what I was also talking about. And so it made me kind of rethink some of the things I was saying into other words to make them kind of like both combined in a way.
Thank you. Next up, Ryan. In what way did you improve your ability to work with the group as a result of this project?
So I improved my ability to work with a group because we all have very different schedules that definitely always conflicted with each other. So being able to make the time to work together and knowing that, like, even when we did our own individual pieces, just being able to work with at least one other person to match with it, it just made me learn how to manage my time differently and use different forms of communication to be able to still achieve a team project while having other things to do that conflict with each other.
All right, thank you. And save the best for last, right, Donna? What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' reports that you decided to not use in the presentation?
I think a compelling argument was some of us, when we were reading the articles, we were thinking differently. We didn't think, oh, we should lower the voting age to 17. We started to think, hey, we were looking at the current argument and saying maybe this isn't the right direction we should head in. So we actually were going full for the counter argument and saying the voting age should be, staying the same. So when we were presenting our evidence and presenting our different point of views, we looked at the evidence, and some of us, Katie, for example, gave the political example of how the maturity level and how that impacts now through social media. It's representing of our maturity, and that argument we decided not to use just because there was more evidence towards the other side of lowering the voting age based on what we were given. But yeah, I can say that one.
Perfect. Breathe. You guys